Hello friends, welcome back. I have prepared what I hope is an incredibly comprehensive tutorial on how to use Bolt, where I start from scratch and build a project you can now see on screen, covering almost every button Bolt has to offer. This is also intended to give you my honest opinion of the platform, and by the end of it, I'll let you know whether I'll be renewing my subscription or not. I have planned a whole new project, and I've made note of all the things I need to tell you on that project, and I'm fairly certain we're just going to go through all the errors and quirks that I want to show you and that you should be familiar with if you're using Bolt. So just to explain you a little bit what Bolt is a web platform that allows you to create full stack applications, whether that's web or mobile applications, directly using prompts, so natural English language, which means that whether you're a beginner or you are an experienced developer and just want to get something quick on paper, this is one of the ways that you can do so. When you arrive to bolt.new, this is the landing page, and if you're logged in, you should be able to directly type a prompt here. Otherwise, you'll type a prompt and you'll be prompted to log in. The pricing works with tokens, so I'm just going to show you that. There's a free version, it gives you 1 million tokens, and then there's a series of paid versions. As soon as I type the first prompt, I will turn on a little viewer that will give us feedback on how many tokens are we using, so that you get the sense of what is otherwise an abstract concept. Okay, so this is maybe the most daunting part for many people who are just trying to get started. I have prepared a full prompt that I think is a very sensible prompt when you start a new project, and I'll explain why in a second. But I am giving you an indication of how you can improve your prompt if you don't know where to start. So I will be creating a platform that previews 3D objects with a library called 3JS. If I go back to Bolt and I just type something like create a web application that allows me to preview 3D models using 3.js. This is one way of getting started, but there is so many improvements you can do to this prompt. And this is lesson number 1. The first prompt is somehow the most important, is the one that will use the most tokens, is the most expensive to run, and is one that's really worth spending time on. So there's one way to improve my prompt, which is that I can click on this button here, which is Enhanced Prompt. Once you click Enhanced Prompt, it does something that's really sensible. And if we just break down the prompt that it's created, you can really learn how to make a very good first prompt. The first thing it does is that it captures the essence of the prompt I wrote, and then it gives a lot more context on how it should aim to do what I asked for. The application should support common 3D formats. It should include essential camera controls, implement proper lighting, feature a clean, modern UI. It should have a file with upload buttons, view controls, model transformations, and so on. And then at the very end, it explains that it should give you a complete implementation using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I am going to run this just so we see what we get, but I am also going to show you the prompt I have prepared using the basis of this to create the project that I am going to run through in this tutorial. So I've run that, and I am going to open a new instance of bolt.new. You can have as many as you want running in parallel to be able to show you a prompt I have prepared. So this is the prompt I have prepared for this tutorial. There's a few core features that I think I want you to understand if you are starting your project from scratch. The first is that at the very, very beginning of the project, you want to make sure you're starting with the right framework. So if you want a web application, that's the point where you should say it. If you want a mobile application, that's the point you should say it. If you want to use a specific framework like Vite, Next.js, Expo, this is when to say it. If you fail to say that at the very beginning, it's much harder to change afterwards, and it will use a humongous amount of tokens, which is very expensive, to be able just to backtrack your work. So highly recommend that if you find yourself in that situation, simply restart a new chat. So just to give you the context of how I am assembling this first prompt, is that I am specifying at the very beginning that this is a Next.js web application for previewing 3.js scenes with the following specifications. I want to build a full screen 3JS viewer component and call it 3viewer. The 3viewer component should load and preview individual TXT files from the scenes folder. So I'm not going to be uploading 3D files. I want to be creating 3D files by scripting in TSX, and I want to be able to see them using 3JS. I want to be able to navigate it using the keys I am used to when gaming, and that it should have a menu component called app menu, and that can be collapsible. So these are very, very, very specific prompts. I did not come up with this on the first go. What I did is that I used that enhance prompt tool a number of times until I was very, very happy with my first prompt. And that's because that first prompt is the most crucial. It doesn't always get it right. So sometimes even with the same prompt, if you're not happy with the results, it's worth starting a new chat and giving it maybe the exact same prompt or the prompt fine-tuned and improved. Because that's what you want to do. Every time you start a new chat, you might learn something and you want to improve that first prompt. Honestly, that first prompt is by far the most expensive because it has to set up the entire project, so you want to nail it. And it's okay to start multiple new chats until you're very happy with the beginning. It will save you loads of tokens. Brilliant, I've copied that into Bolt and now I have to press run. Once you press the go button, you'll notice that it'll start working for you. This is the bit that takes the longest, the setup of the project. Prompts that you type here afterwards take on a lot less time. So the prompt we ran earlier has finished running in the background, and this is what we got out of just that first prompt, which is very, very impressive. So I am actually very curious if this can display 3D models already. So I am going to download a 3D model and let's see if it works. Excellent, I have a 3D model ready. I am going to drag it. It says loading. It does give me the correct size of the model. This is all correct data, but it's not loading the model. That's fine. This is already incredibly impressive. The fact that I could drag and drop a model from my desktop onto the website, and the fact that it could read it and record the properties correctly is already a lot. That would take you a lot of time if you were doing that by yourself. Either way, this is not the tutorial I have prepared. I have gone back into the tutorial I have prepared, and this is it. The first thing is that this one also is not working and is already giving me an error. Errors are completely common. You're just gonna have to become familiar with them. So it gives you a small explanation of what the error is. It will all look like gibberish to you. I also do not understand what this is, and I have two options here. I can either attempt fix or ignore. Though there is a third option, and this is the one I recommend. If the project starts and it's already giving you errors, simply start a new chat with the same prompt, and chances are the next one will just simply not give you the same errors. So there you go, new chat. I am going to paste exactly the same prompt and I am going to press enter again. Okay, brilliant. So I've run the same prompt a few times. I haven't closed them just to be able to show you. This is the latest example, which works perfectly. Actually, this one did not give me any errors. All the other ones gave me errors, and I did click that attempt fix button just to show you. Sometimes it does resolve them, sometimes it doesn't. This works, and that is very, 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 very impressive. Look at that. It's 3D. I am able to move with my keyboard and my mouse as if it was a 3D scene, and then it's loaded for me another scene, which looks kind of funny, but I'm also able to navigate it, and this is in 3D. The menus work, so if I collapse this menu, we can improve on that, but it does collapse. So if I open another one, the navigation works, the menu works, but this one doesn't load other scenes, so that's something that could be improved. This one did have a few errors, so terminal errors, dependency errors. This one I had to run a few times, so I had to click that attempt fix a number of times just for the purposes of this tutorial. This is another example, also works fine. The navigation is a bit different on this one. I'm having to press my mouse, whereas the other ones I could just rotate my mouse. It has a few options here. Look at those animations. I didn't ask any of that, but it did it. It gives me the controls. I can collapse the menu. Doesn't collapse really nicely, but it does collapse. And here's the first one we created, which I did click attempt fix. And this one actually turned out wild. Look at that. That is a 3D scene. I am able to get out of it and choose another 3D scene. The 3D scenes that I created in this one are a lot more elaborate than the other ones. If I move my mouse to the left, it goes to the right. If I move my mouse to the right, it goes to the left. The navigation is off on this one. But again, it did manage to create something really impressive in just the very first prompt. So let's see if the menu works. The menu also collapses, kind of funny, but it does collapse, which is brilliant. For the purposes of this tutorial, I am going to develop this one, which is the one that didn't give me errors. It's not because it's the one that didn't give me errors, but because it's also the one where I can see signs of improvement for our tutorial. And by the way, if you want to keep track of how many tokens I'm using, I have turned off this menu here. You can turn on that menu in settings by hovering your mouse to the left hand side, and in general it just shows here show token usage in chat. So if I turn it off, it goes off. If I turn it on, it goes on. I typically have it off. I am going to turn it on so that you get a sense of how much we're spending. So the very first thing I would highly recommend to anyone using Bolt is just to familiarize yourself with the interface. There's two tabs here that are very important. One is code and one is preview. There's this menu here to be able to collapse the chat or not. And then in preview, there's these 3 buttons. So you can open the preview in a separate tab. You can view your design in a responsive way. There is this select tool. It's called the inspector. We'll show you in a second what this is, and you can turn on full screen. Interestingly, this first project already is mobile responsive, which is also really impressive. So if I leave this menu, I can turn this on and off. This is all responsive to different screen sizes. So if I open Pixel 9, which is a bit different, that works. If I open a different scene, load scene, that also works. And the component at the bottom where it's telling you which scene it has loaded also works. So this is so far looking very good. I am going to turn off the mobile mode and I'm going to go back onto desktop. The first thing I would recommend is to familiarize yourself with what Bolt has done, because every single time you start a new project, it does something different. There is a common structure, and I tried to help it at the very beginning, putting some of that structure in the prompt, but often it does some unexpected things. So just so you know where things are now when the project is at its simplest, it's very good to become familiar. We are using Next.js with the app directory, so it stands to reason that it has created those 2 files, page and layout. Components, it's done something funny where it has created these atoms, molecules and organism folders. These are components. Probably it's done this because in my original prompt I had this sentence. Now this is not what I meant to do this, but that's fine. It doesn't bother me too much, but now I know that that's where the components are saved. Components under UI are standard components from other libraries. In this case, most likely will be ShatCN. Hooks is a standard Next.js folder. Lib is a standard Next.js folder. Scenes is a folder that's specific to this project. I asked in this sentence to create a scenes folder where it will save all the scripts, so it's done it perfectly. This is exactly how I wanted it. Styles, standard, types. The second thing I would highly recommend everyone to do is to check this .bolt folder. This is specific to Bolt. There's 2 files that we want to understand. The first is the ignore file and the other one is the prompt file. To understand the context of what these files are is easiest if you understand how AI agents work. So when you type prompt here and you try to make a change to the project, once you press send, the information that gets sent onto Bolt's agent is not just your prompt. It's your prompt plus the system prompt, plus likely a number of messages in the chat history. All that together composes the prompt that Bolt uses to be able to cater its response to your command. So the ignore file are files that you're explicitly asking Bolt to not send whenever it composes that engineered prompt. The prompt file is the master prompt, and this at the moment, at the very beginning, is something Bolt has populated itself how it thought best. As you progress the project, Bolt keeps on adding things to this file, but you can get the head start on this to be able to better control what you're getting back from Bolt. So I'm going to familiarize myself with what Bolt has done, and then I'm going to add elements of my prompt onto this general prompt. Okay, brilliant. So this is just generic. It's just asking it to create beautiful, not cookie cutter designs. This is also generic. This belongs to the fact that we are using Next.js, which is a framework that I specified at the very beginning of my prompt. This is generic. It's asking it not to create errors. So that's fine. This is also generic. It's asking it to use Tailwind, ShatCN, and Lucid React icons. That is also fine. This is standard when you're using Next.js projects. And then it's asking it to use icons from Lucid React. Perfect. That is fine. This is very, very standard. I am going to add a few more things so it doesn't forget as we progress the project. Great. So this is what I've added. I've taken it from our original prompt because as we progress the project, it will forget our first prompt. So this is a way of keeping that knowledge in the project. So I've copied a lot of this, the technical requirements and the styling guidelines, as well as the file organization. This way, we help our project consistent. This little orange icon means that my file is not saved. So if I press Command S or Control S, that's now saved. And the last thing I'm going to do is check what's in the ignore. So it's asking it to ignore from our system prompt anything inside components UI. That makes sense because anything inside components UI are components from standard libraries, in this case ShatCN. This is it, that's the folder it's asking it to ignore. And then it's asking it to ignore specifically the useToast TS file from hooks. That is a standard from ShatCN as well. Brilliant. So now we are in an excellent position to start editing our project. I have a few things that I want to edit on this project, so let's do it together. The first thing I want to edit is how this menu collapses. At the moment it's collapsing into a long strip. I want it to collapse to a button. Because I want to target one component, which in this case is the menu component, what I can do is that I can go into code and I can find that component, right click on it and say target file. This is another trick that helps us limit the amount of tokens we're using. Another thing I suspect it gets sent on the big engineered prompt on top of your question, the master prompt, and a bit of chat history is a general structure of the project, if not quite a bit of that structure of the project. By clicking target file, you limit the scope that Bolt can do, so it's not editing other files if you don't want them to be edited, but you're also reducing the number of tokens that it's using. Okay, so this is the change I want to make on that component. At the moment, when the app menu collapses, it does so in a tall vertical strip. I want it to collapse to as a menu button with a menu icon. I could press send directly, or I can also use the enhance prompt that's also available here. So I'm going to press that enhance prompt button, and you'll see that it has extended our prompt. I have learned a lot by simply analyzing what that prompt enhance button does, because it's optimizing the prompt to give Bolt the maximum chance to be able to solve your query. So it's giving it a lot more context, it's telling it exactly which icon to use, it is asking it to preserve the current menu features, and it's essentially giving us our best fighting chance to get what we want. It's common sense to read it, because sometimes it may misunderstand what you mean. What's probably happening when you click that button, there is a prompt that gets sent to an LLM that has a series of criteria of what composes a good prompt for Bolt to execute. So I'm going to press enter and let's see what happens. This is something interesting which I noticed that other agentic applications don't do. Most agentic applications will target edits in the file. Bolt, for some reason, at least it seems, rewrites the whole file, which doesn't seem very economical. It has finished, it gives us a small description of what it's accomplished, and if you go into the preview menu, this has indeed worked, which is brilliant in one go. That was very, very clever. It's added these little buttons. If you click on them, it changes scene. I think that's a good idea. I'm happy with that. Before moving on to the next prompt, I'm going to have to untarget this file. Another thing I could do when I write my next prompt, if I really don't want it to edit this file, I could lock it. I am okay. I think my next prompt is not going to edit this file, so I'm going to untarget it. And this time I am going to write a prompt without any specific target. So the next thing I want to do is that when I collapse my app menu.tsx component into a menu icon, I want my navigation instructions.tsx and SceneCard.tsx components to be hidden as well. So that's these two files here, which are these two components. I want them to be hidden as soon as I collapse that menu so that I can navigate my scene on full screen. Before pressing enhance prompt, I am going to copy my prompt just in case, because sometimes it does something unexpected. I'm going to press enhance prompt and it has enhanced my prompt. Let's have a look. Okay, it has enhanced my prompt really well. This is technically how you would do it manually. It will edit these three files, so it has made a lot of sense to untarget the app menu.tsx file. because it's going to need to synchronize the visibility behavior of this 3 component. So I am going to send it and let's see what happens. I got an error. This is not an error that you see very often, but it is an error I have seen before. It just says that the AI provider is currently overloaded. Please try again in a minute. I am going to press retry and the error has appeared again. Now, to be honest, this is not incredibly common. Probably is because this is the end of the hackathon and they have just given everyone 20 million tokens for free. So it may very well be that their servers are at maximum capacity. So I am going to give it a minute and I am going to resume the tutorial. Okay, great. This is now working. I know for a fact, well, it tells me that it is creating a new file and that it's editing a number of files. Something I wish it did is that it told me what it has updated in the existing files. And I think that's quite essential when you're learning to be able to understand what the edits are in relationship to your question. But Bolt just rewrites the whole file, or so it seems. So there is no feedback for me to know what it has done. Not just that, but if I go back onto my preview and I try to collapse my app menu, these components are not collapsing. So the prompt hasn't worked. This is also normal. You do not always get exactly what you want every time you prompt it. Sometimes you need to prompt it a number of times to be able to get the outcome you're after. So in this case, I am glad I copied my original prompt before I clicked prompt enhance. Now I could just paste it and let's see if my original prompt does the job. So I pasted my original prompt and the answer from Bolt is that it's already done the job, whereas in fact it hasn't. An easy way for me to give Bolt the feedback it needs is to take a screenshot, and that's another trick. So I can just take a screenshot and add it to the chat, and that's the screenshot of when it's opened. And now I'm going to take a screenshot of when it is collapsed and add it to the chat. And now I can add my prompt. Okay, so with both screenshots, I have written a new prompt. Please see 2 images attached. The first showing the menu open, where the app menu TSX and the navigation instructions and SIM card are visible. The second image shows the app menu collapsed, but the navigation instructions and SIM card are still visible. When the app menu is collapsed, I want the navigation instructions and SIM card to be hidden. Okay, this is very annoying. I am still getting the overloaded error, so I'm going to try again and again. Okay, brilliant. So it started to work. It tells me it can see the issue. Looking at the screenshots, blah, blah, blah. It can understand the screenshots. This is thankfully because the LLM they're using is multimodal, where you can give it both images and text, and it gives me a bit of explanation of what it is. So if I go back to the preview and I try to collapse, still doesn't work. Okay, so as expected, this is common. Sometimes Bolt, for some reason, it cannot do the most basic of tasks. It'll do some amazing things, but it just will not do some of the most basic of tasks. So here's another trick that I have used a lot. In integrations, you can synchronize the project with GitHub. I have also purposefully created a Next.js project, so you can see that for some frameworks, some integrations are not developed. So in this case, for Next.js, you could use Stripe. You can use Supabase, but you're going to have to integrate it manually. Had I not specified Next.js, what I have found is that Bolt is simply using Vite, which is another framework. With Vite, that option for Supabase is turned on, so you can integrate it with Supabase directly with their service. In terms of tokens, I have already used 200,000 tokens. That is taking it away from that extra 20 million that they gave. So I have two options. I can keep on trying with Bolt, but from my experience, I haven't had very good luck. Just stubbornly keep going at it when the problem is so simple. Or I can open it in another agentic application, which in this case, for me, is going to be Cursor, and fix the problem there. Synchronize onto GitHub and then reopen the project in Bolt. So this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to press the Manage Your GitHub integration. This will create a private repository for me. I will call it 3JS Viewer, create repository, and let's have a look at it on GitHub. It has finished synchronizing onto GitHub, and I am now going to git clone the project into Cursor. Let's copy the URL, open Cursor, clone repo, select repository, destination, and open. Hey, quick pause just to tell you that I'm thinking of starting a newsletter. I haven't yet, but I thought it's worth starting to recruit like-minded people. So, if you know AI is the answer, but you're still figuring out the question, then we are on the same boat. You can join me in that journey. It'll be free. I'll be doing it via Substack, which means that you can get access to the whole history of newsletters. And if you don't like it, you can safely unsubscribe anytime. I'll be putting a link in the description below. Brilliant. So if I type here, first of all, npm I to install all dependencies of this project, it will take a minute, but it will install them eventually. I am getting exactly the same warnings I was getting back in Bolt. And this is also something I have found. I have very, very little control over the packages and versions that Bolt has chosen to install. I have for other projects updated them myself just to get over some of these vulnerabilities, but I have found that when I do so, slowly but surely the chances of Bolt doing what they want simply diminish. So it must be that Bolt has preferred packages and versions, which makes complete sense so that they can manage the compatibility. But this is a limiting factor because some of the things I have tried to do, for example, to use Gemini in Bolt, is continuously trying to use deprecated packages. So now that everything's installed, I should be able to run npm run dev, and my project is running in localhost 3000. So if I copy that and I paste it here, sure enough, this is the same application as we had before, but now it's running on my local host. So if I collapse the menu, we still have the same problem, and that's what we're trying to fix. Back in Cursor, I am going to make this bigger so that you can see what's going on. Terminal smaller. I need to find the app menu, the navigation instructions, the SYN card, drag them to the agent, and write the same prompt. When I collapse the app menu into a menu icon, I want the navigation instructions.tsx, SYN card.tsx to be hidden. Cursor gives me the thought process, which I also find very, very useful. So Cursor does indeed tell me the amendments to the file, which helps me a lot to learn. Okay, that took a couple of tries, but now it seems to be working. If I go into the application running on my local server, and I zoom in, if I collapse this menu, those components hide correctly. If I open this menu, they show correctly. So now I can go back onto Cursor, commit my changes, and synchronize to GitHub. Synchronize, and I can stop my local server. So to be able to consume those changes that we synchronize into GitHub, you need to restart Bolt from scratch. So go back to the landing page and then reopen the project. Open the menu, click on the project, and that should reload the project from scratch. Once it reloads, this menu is also working here, and if we click on the GitHub integration, we know that it has been synchronized with GitHub. So let's continue making changes. The next tool I want to show you to use is the inspector tool. When you click on the inspector tool, you can target the changes you're making specifically to one area of your project. So for example, and this is a very limited example, if I click on the navigation controls, I can target a change to that div of that component. Other note, so the user knows that to be able to exit the 3D navigation space, it needs to press enter. So as you can see, Bolt now knows just to update this one component, and it has updated it. It didn't get the text right, so I can go in and edit that myself. So if I go into the component, you can make changes yourself in this text. So it says exit mouse look. That's not what I meant. Exit 3D navigation. This orange icon means that it's not saved, so I can press Command S or Control S. And if I go back to the preview mode, this has now been updated. So now let's do something more complicated. I have created a series of prompts to strategically help Bolt create a new scene for me. The way that I think about this is that you want Bolt to make changes to your files incrementally, as opposed to ask Bolt to make big sweeping changes across the project. So the first prompt is to effectively create that scene and add some very basic geometry to it. If I go into code and into the scenes folder, I have also noticed that the new scene needs to be registered in the index. So I'm going to add that as well. Create a new scene that creates an array of elliptical floors arranged vertically along a z-axis, with each floor drawn in the XY plane and rotated progressively based on a twist value. Register as well the new scene in the index.ts file. Press send. Brilliant. It is creating the new file, and I suppose it should also not just create but update the index.ts file as I requested. If we go back onto the preview, that's a new scene, and if I click load scene, I am inside a new scene that indeed has a series of elliptical shapes in 3D. This is incredible. There's loads of spheres that I didn't ask for, but let's have a look what it's done. So if I exit, if you go into code and into the new scene, and it's done everything for me. So it's created the new scene, it's added new lights, point lights, it's added a tower configuration. This is great. I didn't give it that much context, so it's had to fill in the gaps for me. Before we go on to the next prompt, let's try and make some of the changes so that this indeed looks like an architecture scene, which is what I'm aiming for. No need to have particles and spheres. The aim of this scene is to create an architectural building, add more floors to the building so it reads as a smoother transition. Now, I know for a fact that this is a slightly vague prompt, so I am going to take a screenshot and try to improve this prompt with a prompt enhancer. I am also going to target this one file so it doesn't go on and edit other files. That's the new prompt. A lot more descriptive, so I am going to press send. Brilliant, it has finished. It has updated the one file I asked it to update, and if we go back to preview, reload that scene, it has taken the prompt to literally. Okay, that's probably because I used the word building. If I didn't want it to look like a standard building, I shouldn't have used that word. But that's okay, because we're going to add sliders to be able to edit this parameter. So I am going to copy my next prompt, create a new component for the UI, name it controls UI. Press send. Okay, it has finished making the changes. It has created a new component. It has updated the styles, updated the elliptical tower scene, and it has updated the index.tsx. So if I go back to preview and I go to load scene, I in fact have a new building controls UI. If I had the menu, I am left with this. So let's see if indeed works. Yes, this is working. Now, for some reason, when I increase the number of floors, it is also moving the camera. The twist is okay, it's not making anything, but I want to be able to see the changes from a fixed camera location. So let's prompt that. The controls UI works, make the following change. So this is another trick, be very, very explicit about what you want to change. When I change the number of floors, the camera resets to a default location. I don't want the camera to change. Let's try and enhance the prompt. That seems to be a better prompt. So if I press send, it has now finished. It has updated the one file. I was hoping it would only update. And if I go back into the architectural building scene and hide the menu, I can move my camera into a location where I can see the whole building. And if I change the number of floors, my camera is no longer resetting. Great, that's what I wanted to see. So now let's make a few more changes to the building controls UI. I am going to target this one file specifically. So targeting this one file, I want to make the following changes. I want for the building controls UI to have a maximum width. I want to make the solid and wireframe buttons narrow using icons, and I want to be able to twist between 0 and 360 degrees. So send. So if I go back to the architectural scene, these are buttons, everything works. I am able to twist up to 360 degrees, but this is still far too wide. So I am going to make it narrow. Make the UI narrow, maximum 300 pixels. While Bolt is working on it, it's worth mentioning that I've been keeping a tab on this number. If I am not targeting a specific file, Bolt is approximately using around 100,000 tokens, there or thereabouts, every time I send a prompt. When I target that file, it is using way less tokens. But so far we have used 700,000 tokens. So that should give you an idea of how much does it cost to run Bolt. If I go back to the architectural building scene and I hide this, this is in fact narrow, all of this works. The wireframe mode also works. So I am going to work into the look of this building a bit more to make it look a bit less naff before we keep working on this tutorial. This is where I got to since you last saw it. The app menu is very similar. I have just changed the styling. The building controls menu has evolved quite a little bit. Now I have a day scene, which is what we have now. I have a night scene, wireframe and solid still work. I can change the number of floors, change the rotation of the building with a twist, change the ratio between ellipse and circle, change the height of the individual floors, change the scale at the bottom of the building, change the scale at the top of the building, and I can control the size of the ground of the scene. I can also reset to the default, I can close, and I can open. So getting to this point cost me 2 million tokens, just so you know. So if you looked before, we had 19.3 and now I have left 17.3. I've been careful to make notes of any tools that I haven't shown you yet. The only two tools that I have used that you haven't seen are the following. The first is this button where you can toggle between discussion and build. So if you toggle this on and then you write something, effectively asking a question to the agent, without asking it to perform any actions, which is quite useful in case you have any doubt on how to progress. I will use this in a second. The second tool I have used, which you should know about, is that when you scroll, you can click undo. Once you click undo, it'll undo any portion of work below that button. So there's two ways of doing it. You can click undo. Equally, you can also click revert if you're further up the chat, and it'll do the same. It'll revert to that point in time and it'll ignore anything below that button. And wherever you see the revert button, if you go to the beginning of Bolt's response and you click on the three buttons, you have that revert button there as well. Something that's also useful for you to know is that 2 million tokens is a few hours of work. So if I go all the way to the top of the chat, you'll see that there's a limit. Any messages above this limit I have lost. I cannot recover them, which also probably means that that context of the project has also been lost, which is why it was so important to record the key things from our first prompt in the global prompt file. So we haven't lost that context. Just for your benefit, I am going to show you some of the prompts that I used to be able to get to this point. They're all very simple. In some cases, I did use screenshots. In other cases, I also used the enhanced prompt. In some cases, I used the inspector tool, but for the most part, it was trial and error. I purposefully also did the whole thing in Bolt. I have already shown you that you can synchronize on GitHub and open it in Cursor, but I wanted to make sure that everything you see outside me showing you that option is progressed exclusively in Bolt. I want to use the next part of the tutorial as a scenario where you might not know how to do something, and this ask or discuss button comes really handy. So I want to ask it a question, and I've written, I want to create a new component that makes an API call to a third-party service. I want the call to be managed server-side via a Next.js route. The third-party service is replicate, so I will need to place an API key safely in an environment variables file. The aim of this new component is to take a square screenshot of the viewport, send it to replicate with a prompt, and display the image replicate returns. Can you create for me step-by-step prompts? I can provide Bolt to help us complete this task. Please provide me with the text prompts only. If I don't write this last sentence, sometimes Bolt just gives me step-by-step instructions on how can I manually execute that task, but I don't want that. I want to get all the texts, all the prompt, and I want Bolt to execute the tasks for me. So I'm going to press send. Okay, great. And now it has created all the prompts for us. So if I go all the way to the top, here are all the steps. So install replicates SDK, set up a replicate API key, create Next.js API route for image generation, implement screenshot capture utility, expose the screenshot functionality into the viewer, create an image generation UI component, integrate the image generation, and orchestrate the API call. So I am going to copy all of this into our working folder, and I am going to paste it back step by step. Copy, and let's start with the first. So I'm going to copy these two back, turn off the discuss mode, and press go. Okay, it's completed the first two tasks. Notice how it has chosen to use replicate 0.34.1. If I go to npm and see what the latest version is already version 1. And if I find version 34.1, it is 9 months old. So because I want to use the latest version, I am going to do two things. First, I am going to tell Bolt in the prompt, and then second, I am going to add the version to our master prompt. The version of replicate SDK you have installed is out of date. Please use 1.0.1. And now, so it doesn't forget, I'll add it to the master prompt. I have found that if I don't do this, Bolt will default back to the old version. So I'll go into code.bolt, and at the bottom of my prompt, I'll add, please use replicate SDK version 1.0.1. I saved, I got the problem, potential problem detected, terminal error, attempt fix. Fixed. Okay, that's another 300,000 tokens used, so let's continue. Let's go to the next step, which is to create the Next.js API route for image generation. Copy. Okay, it has finished and it's giving me another error. It has also done something incredibly annoying, which is that instead of acknowledging that we're using Next.js app router, it has defaulted to the many years old pages router. So it has created the file in pages API generate image.ts. I am going to add to a master prompt that it should use Next.js app router, and then I'm going to revert and rerun this prompt again. Please use Next.js app router structure. I am going to go up and click undo. Revert now. This file is no longer there. It is also because the prompt that Bolt generated for us explicitly asked for the old pages structure. So I am going to amend that. Routes API generate image.ts, and I am going to copy the entire prompt again. Copy, paste, send. Ah, great. Now it has corrected me. This is in fact the right way of doing it. And it has told me as well, since I'm using Next.js 13 plus, using the app directory structure, I'll place the API route in the correct location. Yes, that's what I wanted. It's giving me another error. I am going to click attempt fix. Let me see what it is. Now it is trying to create that directory pages again. So I am going to undo, and I am going to provide it with a bit more information before I click attempt fix. This is a mistake. We should not be using a folder called pages since we're using the app structure of Next.js 13 plus. Please remove any references to pages. Attempt fix. Another error. Same problem again. Okay, so this time was because ESLint was trying to look for the pages directory. This is Bolt's mistake. The pages structure for Next.js are years old, should not be using it, and it's probably because the integration of Next.js into Bolt hasn't really been developed. A bit of a messy fix, but it seems to be working, so let's continue. Prompt number 4, copy, paste. Prompt number 5, copy. Prompt number 6, copy. 2 terminal errors, attempt fix. Another terminal error, attempt fix. Final prompt number 7, copy, paste. Great, finished. Okay, so I had to restart Bolt because it was giving me errors that StackBlitz, which is the parent company of Bolt, was running out of memory to run my project. I've never come across that, so I didn't want to record it. I just simply restarted Bolt and the errors are no longer there. So it has indeed created a menu. It's here on the top right. Everything looks fine. The only thing is that the menu is on top of our UI controls menu. So I am going to ask Bolt to move it. I'll add a screenshot and say the image generator component is on top of the controls UI component. Can you place the image generator component to the left of the controls UI component? I know that that's how they're named because I have gone into code and found them. So that's the controls UI component and that's the image generator component. Okay, it hasn't fixed it. They're both too close to each other still. I am going to try again. See screenshot attached. The image generator component is still on top of the controls UI component. I am going to stop this one because it's trying to edit the elliptical tower.tsx, which seems to be the one displaying the controls UI component, and I do not want it to edit that. So I am going to stop it. It says you've cancelled this message, and I am going to go manually into the viewer layout.tsx, find the image generator. I did that by pressing Command F or Control F, change this number myself, press save, that works. Now this is a bit messy, and that's because Bolt has forgotten where it has placed different components. So the controls UI component is being placed in the elliptical tower scene, the app menu component is being placed somewhere else, and the image generator component is being placed inside the viewer layout. Ideally, all of them should be controlled by one layout, but that's something I suspect I would have to fix myself, so I am going to keep going as is. If I click on the image generator component, this opens nicely. I can write a prompt, early morning image, click generate image, and I know this is not going to work, but let's see. Generation failed, replicate API token not configured. Brilliant, but it is calling the route, which is exactly what we want. So we need to get a replicate API token, and we need to review which replicate API endpoint is trying to call. Okay, so I'm in replicate. I am going to create a new API token, which I'm then going to delete at the end of this tutorial. Create token, copy token, click on the project, new file, env. The route wants us to call it replicate underscore API underscore token. And I am going to paste between quotes my API token. I am going to blur this API token, not because I am going to keep it live. I am going to delete it. But just to make it very clear for anyone who's new to this, never share your API tokens. And now let's review the API endpoint Bolt is trying to reach. Okay, I have found it. It is trying to use an old STXL model. I have found an endpoint I would like to use for this tutorial, so I am going to use this endpoint instead. So back in Bolt, I am going to target this one file, go back to replicate, copy replicate suggestion, back to Bolt, and let's prompt it to make a change. I have tested the following endpoint in replicate, Black Forest Labs, Flux, Can Pro. See below how replicate suggests to call it using Node.js. Please note that prompt will be the user input into the image generation text input. Control image should be the screenshot of the viewport. Replicate suggestion and send. Okay, this seems to have worked. Let's test it. Back in preview, if I open the camera, paste the prompt and click generate image, I get an error. I got this error when clicking generate image in the image generator component. It's always good to give it a bit of context so that you can give it its best fighting chance to fix the problem. Attempt fix. Let's go back into our scene, close the menu, place the camera, click generate, click on the image generator, paste our prompt and click generate image again, and I get another error. Let's try again. I got this error when clicking generate image in the image generator component. Attempt fix, back in preview, generate image, and another fail. Okay, so I have a feeling I am not going to be able to solve this in Bolt, so I am going to synchronize into GitHub and then open it in Cursor and solve it there. That's because in Cursor, I have confidence that Cursor will reference Replicate's API documentation, whereas I haven't had any luck giving Bolt the context of an API documentation. So I am going to click ignore, check that GitHub synchronize, and pause the video. Okay, brilliant, we're done. I will show you in a second all the prompts that I used in Cursor to be able to get to this point. But just to show you the final result, if I click on generate image, I can add a prompt. This gives me a frame. I can click generate. That will send an API call to Replicate, which will return an image using the frame as controlnet, which if you're new to this, just for your benefit, what it does is that it takes a screenshot of my screen, sends it to Replicate, uses the edges of that image as a constraint to be able to generate the image it then returns. So this seems to work. I can see before and after, and I can change the settings of our scene to be able to generate a new view. This all seems to be working. One more time, just for fun, generate, and that is a very, very slender looking building. I am going to adjust this a little bit. Press go. Excellent, that's much better. Let's go back to Cursor and I'll show you everything I've done. So back in Cursor, I have done everything in one chat just to be able to show you the chat history. Typically, I would have broken it down at least into two chats. One for the changes to the route and another one to the changes of the image generator component. But I've kept everything in one chat. I've kept the entire history. It's not too long, so I can show you the whole thing. So in my very first prompt, I tried to give Cursor as much context as possible because it doesn't have the benefit of the history that Bolt had. So I explained first, what is that image generator component intended to do? What is the route intended to do? Why am I taking a screenshot of the screen and user input to send it to Replicate? I went into Replicate and I copied the input of the test I did to be able to give Cursor an understanding of the endpoint I'm trying to call and how the call is structured. And then finally, I gave Cursor the documentation I needed to study thoroughly to be able to understand how to make a call to Replicate's API. So something that's brilliant about Cursor is that I can see the thought process behind the actions it later takes. So by reading this thought process, I can understand whether Cursor itself has understood my prompt. And if it hasn't, I stop the action and then I amend my prompt. Another benefit of me using Cursor for these complex tasks is that Cursor is able to break a big task into smaller tasks and then is able to solve them in small chunks. So Cursor as well was not able to solve it in one prompt. I had to get the errors from Replicate and give them to Cursor. Something that really helps in these instances is to add good logging for debugging, and that allows me to see where in the process things are failing, copy those logs, and then give them back to Cursor. So this is an example of all the logging I have asked Cursor to add to the process so that if something goes wrong, I know where it has gone wrong, and I can copy all of that to Cursor and give it the feedback. At this point, I was already getting an image back from Replicate, but it was not sending the screenshot properly. So I gave it the positive feedback that we are receiving an image, and I gave it the constructed feedback that we needed to send the screenshot to use as a control input. By this point, the system was working. I gave it that positive feedback, and then I explained the changes I wanted to make to the image generator component. This is probably where I would have split it into a second task, because all the previous amendments we were doing were for the router.ts file. Now I wanted to make edits to the image generator file. So for the benefit of the agent having just the context you wanted to have when making edits, and not, for example, any other errors that may have occurred before, sometimes it's often worth it to start a new chat. But in this case, I wasn't getting many errors, so I did have the confidence that the history of that chat was fairly clean, so the context that we were sending to the LLM was of high quality, and I also wanted to keep that history, so I was able to show you how I completed the project. By this point, it was all working, and now I just wanted to add a comparison slider. So this is a package I had found online, and I had said, hey, could you install this package and use it to compare the before and after? So that's it. This is the last prompt I made. I just wanted to move the download button outside of the frame so I could slide the comparison of before and after without the download button interfering with that experience. Done. Okay, so I have synchronized into GitHub, and now I'm going to open Bolt again to make sure that the project still works in Bolt as well. Okay, great. We're back on Bolt's main page. So if we open the project, we click on our project to open, Bolt automatically synchronizes with GitHub, and that's brilliant. It has synchronized with GitHub. It also automatically runs npm install, and that's great, which means that anything that I had installed in Cursor, it's being installed in Bolt, but it's giving me an error that Cursor was not giving me. I am going to try to click ignore and see if our application works, because it was working fine in Cursor. If it doesn't work, I'll click attempt fix. Let's load our scene. Back in our scene, let's open the image generator, paste our prompt, and see if it works. No, it hasn't. It's crashed. So let's try and click that attempt fix button. Window is not defined. Create capture window. Okay, attempt fix. It has decided to rewrite the entire image generator component. Interestingly, all of our logs are coming out as successful. So this probably means that the API request was correctly sent to Replicate, and we correctly received the response from Replicate before or after the application crashing in Bolt. Bolt now seems to be happy. If I go to preview, reload our scene, change our ground, I'll make changes to our building, frame our view, and click generate. Excellent. This seems to be working. So last thing is that now we can enjoy our project in full screen. So if I click full screen, that reopens the project much bigger. I can go back into our scene, frame the camera, edit the prompt, and click generate. Fantastic. I am going to download this last image. Okay, great. One last one just for fun. And I think it's time for me to talk about my honest opinion of this experience and whether I will or will not be keeping my Bolt subscription. Okay, I have made myself a cup of tea because it's time for me to reflect. I'm going to start with the advantages, then I'll go on to the disadvantages, and then I am going to give you my verdict. So I think the biggest advantage of Bolt is just how quickly it can get you off the ground. And look, this is true for most products like this, like vSerial or Replit. The speed at which you can get up and running is simply incredible. And providing you work on that first prompt, and you take advantage of the fact that you can reuse that prompt in different chats and refine it, you can get a very, very good start very quickly. Another advantage is that integrations are great. Something I remind myself often is that the end user just doesn't care about which framework you're using, whether that's Next.js or Vite. To the end user, it doesn't really matter. And the integrations they provide, like GitHub, Supabase, and Stripe, they're all phenomenal. They could add something like N8N, and that would probably cover most of the things I can think of for myself at the moment. Okay, in terms of disadvantages, the biggest disadvantage for me is that I am not learning when using Bolt. You'd think that the biggest disadvantage for me would be that I'm having to rely on other software like Cursor to be able to perform some tasks, or that Bolt at times can be a bit messy, or that, for example, I cannot start a new chat within the same project, helping me to get out of error loops faster. But it's not. The fact that I cannot see what has changed, or that I cannot see the reasoning behind the decisions Bolt makes on my behalf, means that while I'm using Bolt, I am only improving the way I prompt to Bolt, but nothing else. And no marginal improvements for me at this stage are a red flag. So I have decided not to renew my subscription. Look, this is sad, but it's true. Having said that though, I think if you're completely new to programming or are familiar with the basics of it, but would like to get something on paper quickly, then Bolt is still a great option, which is why I decided to still make this tutorial. End of the video. This has been the longest video I've ever recorded. I would love to know what other people think of Bolt and whether I have missed something in this honest review. Thank you very much, and if you have any thoughts, leave them in the comments below.